Media capital of the world. New Milford, Connecticut. Wherever that is. This is Mostly Automotive Marketing with Matt Wilson, a bi-weekly-ish podcast about all things automotive marketing. Now, here's your host, Matt Wilson.
Yes, hello. Another episode of Mostly Automotive Marketing with Matt Wilson. We've been way more than bi-weekly-ish lately, which I'm surprised about, but happy nonetheless. Mostly Automotive Marketing with Matt Wilson, brought to you by Silverback Advertising. Old school relationships, new school technology, providing dealers with metrics that matter, like clicks, calls, form fills, credit apps, footfall traffic. Check us out at silverbackadvertising.com. Okay, cool episode topic today. If you're a vendor, agency, somebody who prospects and works with dealers, provides a service to dealers, then I think you're going to find today's episode helpful. And we'll bring in my guest today right away. His name is, how do I hit the button here? Here we go. Technical. There we go. Michael Aufmuth. He is the partner at EliteFI Partners. Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. We're going to talk about, so the way that we prospect or pitch or start relationships with dealers is different than it's been in the past, right? And by we, I mean vendors, agencies, companies that provide services to dealers. So before we talk about how talking to dealers has changed this year, give us a quick rundown of what EliteFI Partners does, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So EliteFI Partners works with dealerships in their finance department or finance offices. We supply F&I products, training, support. We set dealerships up with reinsurance, retros, DOWCs, profit share programs. Ultimately, we work, though, from the sales department all the way up to the finance department in training, and then basically developing to help assist sell with F&I products.
All right. So you are, working towards bringing dealers on as clients. I'm working towards bringing dealers on as clients. Prior to COVID and everything going bananas in March, what was the primary way that you and your team would reach out to dealers?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It almost seems like you forget what it was prior to COVID because it's changed quite a bit.
You're like, I don't know. Good question.
But no, yeah, COVID, prior to COVID, it was a lot of, just in visit, just basically knocking on doors, getting in front of dealerships, going to stores, and making rotations. You would have schedules every day laid out of like the dealerships that you were going to visit, to get in front of or try to get in front of the appropriate staff. And with our agency, it's, some dealerships might take 10 visits before you get to the appropriate person, or it might take you 5 visits. Or if it's maybe a smaller dealership, you can get to the appropriate person, but it takes multiple visits to get the message of what you're trying to do across. So, but the general gist of it was prior to COVID, we were very much in person going to dealerships. And that was kind of the strategy. And, as far as like using electronic tools, it was email to follow up, text messages here and there, and a little bit of, phone calls, but a lot of in-person visit.
All right. So obviously the in-person visit thing has changed a lot. And I'll preface this question with, yesterday I was talking to a dealer. He's a client of mine. He's in Long Island, and I actually used to work in that group. So I know him prior to our current relationship where I'm, his agency for his store. And we were talking yesterday about December advertising. And I said, hey, maybe I'm going to be in Long Island next week. Maybe I'll stop in and see you. I miss, hanging out person to person, talking about it. We've been doing, Zoom and Google Hangouts since March. And he's like, yeah, man, stop by anytime. Come see us. And I said, are you seeing vendors a lot? Are vendors coming in to see you? He's like, yes. He's like, absolutely. He's like, they don't care. I'm seeing a ton of vendors come in and see me. And he said, I don't mind that you haven't come to see me. Your agency does a good job. I know you. We get just as much accomplished over a quick Zoom meeting as we do with me driving 2 hours to Long Island to visit his store. But he said that he sees a lot of vendors, but he thinks part of it is because of the part of the country he's in. He's in a very dense dealer part of the country where, competition is fierce. He's in, the New York, Long Island DMA, which is a coveted market by vendors. So it seems like in his case, he's still seeing a lot of, pitches or vendors How have you guys, your company and you personally, adjusted to getting in front of dealers since, the world went bananas in March?
So I feel like we've adapted as time has progressed. So, right when, March, April, May, COVID, was really kind of in its, prime, as so to speak. And like we had dealerships in Michigan where, when it first hit, dealerships shut down completely. Like you weren't even allowed to sell a vehicle. Nothing was allowed to be open. And then as that started to stage back open, us as vendors were the last priority for a lot of these dealers.
Right.
And so, initially our visits and our, training and things that we were doing was 100%, like you said, it was done through Google, it was done through Zoom. It was 100% remote. And then as time kind of progressed and states started opening up and allowing us to get back into dealerships a little bit more, it kind of was like a hybrid, so where stores I would be in, maybe similar to you, where I would visit every single time, I would visit, once a month or once every 2 months, and then try to mix in the Zoom meetings in between. And now it's kind of, I hate saying it, but back to a lot of in-person visits. But the hybrid to that now is that we're using these tools a lot more frequently to create more frequency with our dealerships.
Do you find that some of it is based on geography, like in different parts of the country, the cadence of in-person visits to virtual meetings is different?
Absolutely. So I live in Arizona, where dealerships did not shut down, an in-person visit really never stopped. So I completely think that's true. Whereas in Michigan, everybody was a little bit more sensitive to it because of how it was handled by the governor, how the state shut down. And so dealerships did get very sensitized to letting vendors and different companies come in the door.
I was talking to a dealer a couple months ago on, it might have been April or May. And we were talking about, he was in the Midwest somewhere, like maybe not in the Midwest. Where was he? Indiana, Iowa, somewhere with an I. And we were talking about, it was a podcast about digital retailing. And we were talking about the pandemic, and I was asking about how, it's affected his business. And he's like, what pandemic? Like what business? Like I'm doing, December type business here in April at my store. He's like, for his store, it was like literally nothing was going on. And now I'm in the Northeast where, at that time we were like hyper, locked down, don't leave your house, don't do anything. So to hear that from him about that part of the country, I was like, well, maybe I should be prospecting to places in the country where it's not as much of a big deal, and kind of picking and choosing the dealers I'm talking to regionally based on what's going on in their area.
Or even by industry. What we found is like when the pandemic hit, we have power sports dealerships that just went, haywire during the period and ran out of inventory. They were so busy they couldn't get inventory, and they were searching other states to try to get units to sell. And like, similar to what you're saying, they were just crushing it. They were having numbers even better than their normal December, November type months, where they normally have a really record-setting type of approach. And they were doing it back during the pandemic, where auto dealerships were really struggling. They were blowing up.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Taking time to diversify your business a little bit, or marketing to people that might be in a different situation than where you live or your bread and butter. And I'll add, my example for this, before I ask you, will be, part of my job at Silverback is also to bring on agency partners. Right, we have an OTT platform that we white label to other agencies. It's a little bit different than the other platforms that are out there in the market. And so part of my job is to work with other agencies and bring them on and then fulfill their OTT needs. So what I did to sort of diversify, knowing that my dealers weren't spending that much money early on, and I wasn't going to be getting new dealers or pitching new dealers early on, was I reached out to agencies in parts of the country that weren't being affected as hard as New England was, and agencies that had clients that were sort of COVID proof, like agencies that, had retail. We saw a lot of retail, kind of like power sports, like home improvements, high-end appliances, liquor stores, things that, purchases that would keep people entertained when they were stuck at home. Like those type of agencies became agencies that I reached out to early on in parts of the country that I thought would be more willing, less of business was being less affected by the shutdowns, and saw that help me and my company get through some of the slowdown coming from automotive. How did you guys adjust to that?
So how did we adjust to the change of COVID, basically, or what did we do different?
Yeah, like what did you do differently in order to keep bringing on, business, or pivoting a little bit? You couldn't get in to see dealers for a couple months or a couple weeks, whatever it was.
Perfect. So with us, when all of this first started to hit, we really, it was kind of a much needed slowdown. It allowed us to focus on a couple things that we weren't really hyper focused on. So first off, our website, we got really deep dive like into our website and really put a lot of emphasis on making sure that a dealer could get on there and find the information they needed to find. We made it so our story, like what we're going through all the time, is front and center for a dealer. So it's updated all the time. You go on our website and you see fresh content. And then the products that we offer, we put, not all of them, but the top most popular products into our site so a dealer can go in there and research what those products are. And so that was, if you take a positive that came out of COVID, allowed us to, like, as you would say, pivot and focus at our online presence, which has helped us, tenfold, because now we're getting our message out much faster to people. And, we, like many people before COVID, were on social media. I was on Facebook, I was on LinkedIn, I was on these platforms. And one of the other things that I've, changed or I pivoted to is trying to be more vocal, trying to be more out there on these platforms and talking about what we offer and the services that we do. And that has brought a lot of positive to our agency, in the sense that now dealerships are seeing us that wouldn't have seen us. And, the networking that truly comes out of that is priceless. But the biggest thing is, like, when that really happened, is it allowed us to slow down and focus on our website. It allowed us to really get our content and our products on there so that dealerships can really dive into that and research who we are and what we offer before they even talk to us.
Yeah, it was a good time for agencies and companies to do sort of an internal review and update processes and procedures. And we did the same thing. We took it as an opportunity. We actually started designing a new website, which we just launched recently. So same thing. We worked on that. We worked on better ways to communicate with our clients. We came up with our whole strategy on how we're going to continue going forward. Like, I got this, I don't even have it turned on. Here we go. See if the people watching that video can tell. There you go. I got my light. We figured out, okay, we're going to be doing a lot more meetings on the computer, right? So let's make sure we're doing the best job possible on that. Let's make sure everyone's got lights, and they've got, I got this little selfie light here. Make sure everyone's ready for that, and audio is good. And let's make sure we're giving our clients the best service possible. We'll refine our pitch decks, the way we pitch. We'll make improvements to some of our platforms. I think we revised our dashboard that we use for clients, and used it as an opportunity to do those things that you don't have time to do during normal business, because your client comes first. We don't have time to work on our own website because we're busy working on clients' websites. Right. So I think a lot of companies did that, and now we've done all that, and I don't want to say things are back to normal, because they're not back to normal. Maybe they'll never be back to normal. I don't know. But at this point in the game, are things back to normal, or is this changed? Is the way that guys like you and I prospect to dealers and deal with dealers going to be different from now on?
It's going to be different from now on. And I believe that. I think the reality of anybody that's in our space as a person, a company that is marketing a dealership, okay, you have to adapt and pivot regardless of what's going on around you. So right now, the example is COVID, right? We're all changing our approach based on COVID. But if we're not continually trying to adapt and pivot and bring, the most effective way to be, basically serving up value to our ships, we're going to fail, right? And so what COVID has done is taught some of us to be better at it. And so, with us talking, about updating our website and bringing, a better approach to our dealers online, it's also gone into training, and like you said, we use Zoom frequently now, as far as like what we're doing with our dealer personnel and staff. Sitting down, we used to sit across from a desk and do role playing, and now I'm doing it on a computer with them, and they're having to do their presentations to me, and I'm being that, really hard to handle customer that's giving them every objection, but trying to stump them so that I can further their education as far as being a finance manager. And again, it's, is it going to change? Absolutely. Is it going to be this way next year? No, it's probably going to be different. And, I think that's the trick, is that you have to be ahead of it. You have to try to, constantly be doing it better than not just your competition, but, making it so that it's accessible and easy for your dealer, because we don't know what next year is going to bring us.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's going to change or it's going to be COVID 2.0, and, you want to be ahead of that curve. And so that's the key, is to adapt in a sense that you're bringing value regardless of what the situation is.
I'll preface this this statement with saying I do miss seeing people face to face and talking to dealers and being in a dealership. I was the marketing director at a group for 7 years, so I like being in the store. It feels, this agency part of my career is new to me. I've only been with my agency for about a year and a half. And so being in a store, visiting a store, shooting a commercial, going over the media plan and the budget, reviewing results is comfortable for me because that's what I did for 7 years, right? So I miss that. That being said, I feel like the efficiency that I've been getting out of not traveling has skyrocketed my efficiency, right? So I have a Honda dealer in New Orleans who is a great dealer, and they started with me early in the year, and they're great guys. And I also have an office. My company has an office in New Orleans. So I was going to New Orleans like probably twice a month, right? To go work I have another office in Baton Rouge. So I would go down to Louisiana and visit the dealer and go to one of the offices or hit another dealer. I have another dealer that's way north of Baton Rouge. So I'd see that dealer every once in a while. So I was going to Louisiana twice a month, right? But, I live an hour and a half from JFK. So to drive to JFK and then, my company pays $150 for me to park there for 3 days because it's New York. And then I got to fly to New Orleans. And then I got to meet this client for what essentially is like a 2-hour meeting, chat, catch up, get to know you. Here's what's different. Sit down, go over the stuff, maybe shoot a spot. Maybe I'm there for 5 hours to go work at my office for, the other half of the day and then fly home the next day is a tremendous amount of time and resources for me to have that meeting. So I talked to that dealer yesterday. We had a 45-minute Google Hangout. I'm bummed I couldn't be there, but we went over the November month-to-date results. We went over the December budget and the media plan, and now we're done. I'll check in with him next week and we'll talk. And so is it a good thing that it replaces the in-person visit? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, I've been way more efficient without having to travel at all for the last 6 months. I like traveling, but I also like not having to travel.
Right.
So what about you?
Questioning, what you're saying, I agree. I think that the efficiency is for sure there, right? We can increase our frequency of seeing a dealer, being in front of a dealer, reporting back to him, talking to him through a Zoom meeting. I think that's all positive, but I think you cannot replace an in-person visit. I think you have to keep doing that. And I don't know if there's an exact recipe for it right now. And I think dealers are very understanding right now. I think with everything that's going on, they understand that we're not going to be in store as much as we once were. But I think that's going to change. And that's why I think that, we're going to have to look at this differently down the road as, vaccines come out and we go back to normal life. I think our in-person visit is going to have to go back up. I think that's going to keep us, directly correlated with our dealer and what's going on to make sure that we're always engaged and in tune, and I think we don't have to maybe do it as we were prior to COVID. Okay. But we will have to do it and mix in some in-person and then mix in some Zoom. Make sure that we're approaching it with both of them going forward. And I think that's the pendulum that's going to shift. I think we're going to have to see, right now where the pendulum shifting towards online because it's one effective and efficient and, safe, but I think as time goes on, we're going to watch it go somewhere halfway, in the middle there.
I think I've been communicating with my clients more now than I did prior because like you said, you said an interesting thing there. You said that they understand, right? Of course they do. But for me, I'm like, well, I want to make sure that my dealer doesn't forget about me or that they don't think they're getting the responses or the resources or the results from my agency that they were getting in the past. So if anything, I've been overcompensating for not visiting my dealers by communicating with them more. I talked to my GM at a Long Island store who I would visit frequently, most frequently of all my dealers, because they're one of the closest dealers to me, right? I can just hop on the ferry and I'm in Long Island and get some great bagels while I'm out there, some pizza in Brooklyn on the way home, no problem. A pleasure to do. But I probably talk to him more now than I did last year. So I think when we do go back to more in-person visits, it's important to remember their expectation probably is now that level of communication they've been getting from us recently, right?
Right. No, I think you're exactly right. That's what I think about it in the form of advertising and frequency. We have to keep increasing our frequency in the store. We're just using now different tools to do it. I think we have to increase our in-person visits as time goes on and we get further away from COVID. But I think the frequency will just be, we'll mix in Zoom on top of the in-person to keep it, front and center what our message is, what we're doing, what's going on, and what the benefit of our agency or our partnership is.
So for your business specifically, are there products or I guess it's two questions. Are there products that dealers can offer or ways they can offer those products that has been able to help them during the pandemic?
Yeah. So great question. So during and I'm going to rewind a little bit here. When we talked about when COVID first hit, one of the things we got in the pattern of doing, talking about Zoom meetings, is getting with every administration, every company, and taking the time that is painful in some cases, but going through the presentations and learning all the different products, learning what's out there and learning what's available. And so it allowed us to strengthen our arsenal. The way we looked at it was, a dealer, if they're going to look at products, I better have the best foot to put forward, the best product to put on the tray. So that way I can talk to them about something that might engage them or get their attention. And some of those products are very sensitive to the timing, right? So with COVID going on, do you have a product that sanitizes a vehicle? Do you have something that's relative to what's going on in the marketplace? So we have exciting products that come down the line right now that are even adapting today, where a service drive, for example, one of the products I'm really kind of excited that's coming out here soon. Service manager can go out with his cell phone, scan a vehicle. Okay, it'll tell him service contract options that are available, payments that are available. It's all done on the phone. He can send a quote right from his phone. He can scan a customer's driver's license, scan their credit card, and complete a sale without even touching a single thing. It's all scanned in, and it takes about 60 to 90 seconds to do it. Now, what's cool is it'll now allow him to do the chemical as well, so they can sanitize through this app. Okay, and then on top of that, if they don't if the dealership isn't very consistent or they don't have a good track record at selling, we can follow that up now with a team of people that's going to call behind them to do the sale and basically capture revenue for a dealership. And so what we're doing is we're creating these pipelines now that didn't used to exist based on COVID and the technology that's kind of coming to the table, and then taking it to the next level so that a dealership will implement it. If they don't have success, then it goes to another team, and the dealership can capture one way or the other. So it's changing, like you would say, adapting and pivoting.
I thought that the only positive to come out of COVID would be the fact that my local liquor store delivers now. But as it turns out, it's helped push dealers to do things that we probably as a group should have already been considering, or at least considering, but doing prior to this. Is these things you're just talking about has fast-tracked those things, which I think has been a positive of COVID for sure.
And one of the other things is and I'm sure you can attest to this, but most dealerships prior to COVID were not prepared to be online or approach their business model being able to complete a transaction on the computer. And so that was one of my focuses, and that is, how do I bring that technology? How do I bring those tools forward to a dealer that, one, is not intimidating, easy to install, and effective? And so, everybody can learn Zoom overnight, in my opinion, but then that doesn't mean everybody can sell a car online overnight.
Right.
So, we got real aggressive with that. And that was actually really a big benefit for us, that we could go to a dealer and talk to them about, online presentations, online, document signing, remote signatures, and different tools that are real relevant right now, especially with customers that don't want to come to the dealership. You're going to have that. And it's going to continue on for time, even after COVID, where a customer's one of two things: not comfortable doing it because of, they're still scared, or just doesn't want to. They're sensitized to the Carvanas and the CarMax type approaches that are out there, the rooms, that type of, online engagement. You have to compete in that space now. And so that's one of the big things that we're adapting and learning and bringing some of those tools, to a dealership and do all that.
Slightly off topic, but what is a dealer's biggest what's the biggest hurdle to a dealer? What's the question? How am I trying to word this? What's the biggest hurdle you have to overcome with a dealer to get them to believe they need to start being able to sell cars online? That was still worded terribly, but I think you know what I was trying to get at there.
So, and it's funny because when COVID hit, it forced dealers into thinking this way. I think a lot of dealers today still would not even have this remotely on their radar.
Agree.
They would have their website. A lot of them have a boilerplate cookie cutter type of approach with the different vendors that are out there, and they would offer their vehicles. They would show a price. They would be very, not saying not transparent, but they would have just the basic information up there. It stops there. The customer then would have to call or come into the dealership. And I think, the biggest hurdle that, is getting a dealer to engage, thinking they have to think this way, That was the biggest hurdle initially. And I think
Mhm.
COVID pushed a lot of dealerships into forward thinking. It kind of like, it threw the automotive industry into overdrive is what it did. It made a lot of dealerships think in a way they didn't used to think they had to, and it made them adapt, right? And so these dealers now are approaching their online presence in, a lot of different ways now where they can do a transaction online. Now, that's part of it. The biggest hurdle I've seen is, we went through and vetted out the companies that we want to use, especially in the finance office, for like a remote delivery tool, for a menu platform, the tools that are available that integrate with all the different DMS and systems that are out there. And we found, some really good answers. And now when I go into a dealership and I install these tools, okay, you find personnel that is still adapting to an old way of doing it. They're not using or utilizing these tools. And I see it every day. Like I'll go into a store, they're like, oh, I got to send somebody out to get a document signed. I'm like, why don't you use the tool that is in your computer that'll literally send it to their cell phone and they can sign the document on their phone? We've gone through this in training. So it's like that's the biggest hurdle now, is getting people to think that, they can do this, and then make them understand that the benefit is there. Like you've gone through all of this. Now you have these tools and these resources. You have to adapt and use them. You have to stop thinking like you did prior to COVID.
So I think the recap for me is, in terms of, vendors and partners and agencies, prospecting dealers, is we're kind of at a hybrid approach now, right? It's okay to go in and see dealers and call on dealers, but that doesn't mean that you should stop with, emails and phone calls and that kind of thing. However, like you've been doing, and I've been doing it as well, the importance of branding and being a resource online and on social media is probably more important than ever. And you shouldn't give that up now that you can get back on the road and visit dealers, right? How important is it to make sure that people like you and I continue to do that?
I think it's very important. I think, a lot of times it's funny, like you start out when you first start doing posts of videos, like myself anyway, and I would watch the likes, right? Like that's how I would measure whether people were seeing my message. I would get people liking it. And the funny thing about that is that's really, the likes don't mean anything to me anymore. It's more like I'll have a ton of people that'll talk to me about a message or something I said that didn't even like it. But that's effective. That means I'm reaching people. They're watching my message. They're seeing what's going on. And for me, a lot of times it's, I'm talking about, the transition, the adapt and pivot, the things that we're talking about right now. My message online is, here's what we're doing. Here's what's working. Here's the tools that we're using. Here's something that's really exciting in our agency right now. And I'm bringing all that front and center as we're experiencing it. And that is incredibly important now, in the sense that I can touch all of these people all at the same time with what's going on in our agency. And I can't imagine going forward without doing it. And it's not so much, I don't look at social media anymore as like, I need to get likes, and I don't care about, that growth as much as I care about it as a means of me to communicate with dealerships on a larger scale. And
Go ahead. Sorry.
And I think that's the key. I think going forward, we have to continue that type of approach.
I look at the podcast the same way. I don't care how many people listen, but you know what? I've started relationships and gotten clients through doing the podcast. And to look at the numbers and say, oh, I got this many listeners on this episode. Well, you know what? I created a contact through that episode, somebody who, is either a friendship or a lead or a new client. And there's nothing wrong with that. Or, people who at least will, come back and check out my content on a regular basis because they liked it. And then who knows where that relationship goes down the road. And I think I've said to myself, I used to have a math teacher in middle school who did that. And I'd say, okay, well, when I get back to traveling more and my time's always valuable, but when I'm traveling more and I have less time, I got to make sure I don't stop doing this, because it's going to be harder to find time to do this when I'm not home as much. I got first graders doing school downstairs, so there's more noise in my house. And I've made an effort to make sure that I don't let this slip. And I think the lesson for vendors out there and partners out there is that the changes they've made during the pandemic to do that kind of thing, you can't give up on it once you have less free time,
Right. Well, and I think there's a couple things here. Like a dealer, a company, anybody that's in business, their biggest asset, the biggest thing that's the most important part to them is going to be their time, right? And so we even had this conversation inside of our agency, and that is, we have to bring value. Okay. We have to make sure that when we do get that person's time, I have something valuable to them, or all I'm doing is wasting their time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's kind of the approach, and like the going forward message is everything that we're trying to do, everything that's online, all of our, approach in front of a dealership is all about valuing that dealer's time. And I know when I'm in front of him, regardless of what we're talking about, I have something he'll want to hear, and so that's like, it's a lot of time on our part of, doing the steps, learning all the companies, continually educating yourself on products that are coming out so that you stay ahead. Because the last thing you want to do is go into a dealership and they know more about a product or a service than you do. Because then, what are you doing? You're wasting their time.
Michael Aufmuth, partner at EliteFI Partners. I appreciate your time. I think this has been great. Lots of good information here for dealers, and good stuff for sure. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And happy holidays.
No, same to you.
It's officially the holiday season. So,
right.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. You too.
There you go. Michael Aufmuth. Good stuff. Good information in there. Before we wrap up here, I just want to thank John Gray at Pinterest. I don't know if you can check this out here. How do I point at it? There we go. Pinterest. For sending me this swag here, this pullover zipper thing. It's the most comfortable thing I've ever worn. And John Gray is the director of automotive at Pinterest, and he was on an episode of Expera Marketing, which is Colin Carasquillo's podcast that I co-hosted, and he sent us these this swag here, and I appreciate it, John. Super comfortable. Not only is Pinterest a great platform for dealers to be on, but they also have great clothing. So thank you very much. All right, Mostly Automotive Marketing with Matt Wilson, presented by Silverback Advertising. Old school relationships, new school technology. We'll see you on the next one.
Mostly Automotive Marketing with Matt Wilson is brought to you by... Wait, this guy has sponsors? Oh, never mind. This sheet of paper's blank. No sponsors. That makes more sense. For updates, info, future episodes, and more, follow on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube, like on Facebook, and connect on Frackle. You guys made that last one up. That's not even a thing, Frackle. Come on.